Welcome to DNS. Welcome to DNS and You, a primer on website names, presented by Phil Jochimson. I am David Berg, a BI developer with SMPH and moderator for today's session. So after the presentation, we might have a couple of minutes or at the end for some Q&A. During the presentation, place your questions in the chat and I'll read them to our presenters. If there are any unanswered questions when we wrap up, Phil will compile answer to those questions and reach out afterwards. Speaking of Phil, Phil is a DevOps engineer with WPS and DoIT. Phil has been a major part of these IT conferences for the past few years, and he's given lots of different talks on a variety of topics. And today we are just really excited to hear a little bit about DNS. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Phil.
Thanks, David. Yeah, and I guess as we keep having folks show up in the waiting room, go ahead and let them in. And like I said, we're already good to go on rolling with the recording. This is about a 15-minute session, so I probably have something like 10 minutes, depending how fast I talk. And if you have some questions or suggestions or things that you've found good for trying to explain what DNS is and helping folks work through using it, those are certainly welcome as well. I did a talk very similar to this for my group internally a number of months ago, and just found it really helpful. I think one of our supervisors was able to use some of the commands almost immediately that same day, and actually was able to answer a question without having to even go ask someone else about where a site's hosted. So we'll jump right into it. Anyways, DNS and You, the primer on website names. Get the clicker to work. Cool. Yep, I've been here almost 20 years at UW-Madison. This is my first full-time job out of college. I do a lot of stuff with websites and web technologies in the area that Dave was talking about. And I am not perfectly authoritative, so I hope I'm helpful. I don't know everything about this subject, but these are some of the things I've run into that come up a lot. So DNS is known as the domain name system. You can take phrases, we know this, like, yahoo.com, amazon.com, right? They're kind of word phrases. And they get translated so that your browser has an idea of where it can go to go get a website for you. The browser and your computers don't know what these words mean, though. So they have to have a translation. And this is really what DNS is, a way that lookup happens. So you get something called an Internet Protocol address, like this one, the 54.230.202.5. And that's just one example for what www.wis.edu resolves to. So the structure of the names, they're all separated by these dots or these periods. So as an educational institution, the top level domain, the TLD for us is, of course, .edu. .coms was supposed to be, commercial or business. That's, of course, very commonly where you'll find, just different e-commerce shops, etc. You'll also notice just a lot of things end with .com, even if they're not exactly, commercial in nature. In our case, though, wisc.edu, with a lot of our email addresses end with, is called a second level domain, and you can kind of see what happens here: third level, fourth level. So it's possible for you to put some useful information in these names that people can kind of understand what's happening, right? So if you have a project or a lab in a specific department, a very reasonably common sense name would be project name department name .wis.edu. If it's a different university, of course, it's kind of something different than WISC.edu, but you could keep going down this list. And obviously there's kind of a length here issue, right? You get to an 8th level domain and it's hard to remember. And it doesn't really necessarily get what you want done as far as that. So that's how these are set up. Sometimes there's considerations technically for what you can do with a third level domain. There are fewer third level domains and more suggested restrictions on them than there would be for fourth level domains. That has to do with a variety of different things. We're not going to get into all of those today. But here are some examples. These were a few of the command line tools that you could run depending on which operating system you're on. So NS lookup is the simplest, easiest one. And that works on anything. So Windows command prompt, Mac terminal, Linux, it's already there on all of these things. And you can put in either the website address, right? So the website name itself. So you don't want to put all of the rest of it, just like the host name is what's that called? That part that's right after HTTPS://. So in this case, I gave an example of it.whisk. You can also do what's known as a reverse lookup, and so you can do an NS lookup for the IP address itself. Dig is something that's not usually on Windows machines. I'm sure there's a way to install it, but it's just not commonly there. But on Macs and Linux, you can use it. There's a lot greater depth of information that's possible with the dig command. And the second example here, the SOA, so asking for what's known as the start of authority record for Whiskey to You is something you can run with dig. NSLOOKUP doesn't have an ability to do that. But that command, that dig SOA Whiskey to You, would tell you information about how to get a hold of the correct hostmaster contact for a Whiskey to You DNS question. PowerShell on Windows, I understand this should be the command for it. I will be double checking that later, but this should be the command to allow you to run that check. Another possibility here too is curl. And now curl is commonly used for retrieving a web page or making a web request somewhere. But if you include that V after the I parameter, you'll get the verbose output. So I'm going to do this one as a live example here. I commonly use this very much. So in Chrome and all of the other major browsers, there's an ability to get to the browser tools or a developer dashboard or something like that. And what's neat about that is that as opposed to just this, I run it on the command line thing, you can see, first of all, did the web page load as you expected? And then, all right, where did it go in order to get that whole web page back? NSLOOKUP doesn't tell you whether that's a website or not, or that it even worked. And yeah, so that, let me back up one more here. Okay. Let me jump out of full screen mode. All right. I'm gonna grab another browser here. All right. So action assistant, screen sharing. All right. So can folks see that additional uh, browser that I had brought over to the screen? Is that working all right? Cool. All right. Guess, does anybody want to give me a website name? We'll punch that in here in a second. If you can put that in chat, that'd be cool. I'll do that. I'm gonna walk through the steps though. So in Chrome, we've got this little 3-dot menu. And then down over here under more tools. Sure, we could do that. I've got this developer tools. There's again on a Mac here, this is what the shortcut would be for that. The default here is that you'll get this thing to show up underneath there, and then specifically there's a lot of options, right, for like what's on the page, but this one called the network tab is the one that I'm looking for. So, and yeah, we'll hopefully I spelled that right. All right, cool. So if you look at all the things that loaded on the web page, of course, there's a lot of stuff. This thing, 75 different requests, right? That's a lot. I also know that the first thing I asked for is the one that has the information. There's an ability to filter that down and just look for the document. I only want, to care about this one to just shorten it. But right there, that will tell you that's the IP address that my computer reached out to on port 443. That's the HTTPS port in order to get back the answer for duckduckgo.com. With that IP address, it knew where to go. It asked that computer, that server, for the website. So I use this one all the time. In shared hosting, when we're moving a site from server A to server B, there's a thing known as the time to live, which is it's the amount of time that answer, like what that IP address, is valid for. We usually set that down to something really short or reasonably short, like 5 minutes. So we make a change, And then within 5 minutes, everybody's going to be able to get that answer, regardless of where they are, right? That they should have been checking every 5 minutes to get the update. It also means we get 5 minutes away from bringing it back if we have to roll it back. So, and when I do this with my browser, I can be like, all right, good. Not only did I get the new server, I can tell that the website loaded as I expected it. All right, let's get back in here. Okay. As far as policies at UW-Madison, as far as I'm aware, there isn't anything actually on policy.wisc. So I don't believe there's actually like officially university sanctioned, full-blown policies on what you could do with DNS names. There's a whole bunch of incredibly common sense things, and a vast majority of that is actually captured in this do it DNS name selection policy. I feel like it's not really a do it suggestion about this, but there's a lot of stuff in there, right? Like, we don't want offensive names in any language, preferably. We don't want to, there's a lot of things in there. So as usual, we've got the slides for this. The links are going to be in the slides. They're going to be active, so you're going to be able to go take a look at them. Just as another couple examples, WhiskWeb has some more specifics, right? Like they lean away from doing .coms or .orgs, for example. And so that specific service has a different little bit of set of guidelines that go around kind of these do it ones. And then definitely ask the IT professionals that you've got in your college or your department. There may be additional policies, suggestions, or best practices that they've got that are really important for a variety of reasons. DNS, I think of it as using it for websites, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens too. And let's see if I think I did this out of order now. There we go, record types. I'll come back in a sec to that last one. So the DNS record types, like MX right here, right? So that can be used for email. So there are a number of things where maybe you want to do email marketing with a specific, at and then domain name. You also might want to do something then with, like, how do I phrase this? If you're contracting with a company to do mass emails, you're going to want them to be the ones that are sending the emails, but you might not want that same company being the one hosting your website. So you can have an MX record point email at a email hosting provider and point, an A record, which is usually used for websites, or a CNAME to somebody else, whether that's your server or something you put in Amazon or even a third party, right? And then text records, this is another good example. We use this a whole bunch for doing like the Google site verification codes, like prove that you own the site. And then common challenges, not all the DNS is in the same place. So there's not like one place you can actually go to make every change necessary for campus. A lot of Active Directories have some play in that because they produce and respond to results as well. And then a bunch of references. I think I've got like a minute for questions if we had any. So do folks have any questions?
I guess here's one little question.
Sure.
So Phil, with DNS, the number that is given for the DNS, is that auto-assigned, or is there a chance for you to be able to kind of choose what the DNS ends up being?
So, an IP address is not commonly auto-assigned for, I'm going to say, for websites. But an example of like why Active Directories are used on campus, they use a thing called DHCP, which will auto-assign a computer that's part of that domain an available IP address. So it might be that you come to work, turn your computer on, you plug it in, or you get on the Wi-Fi, and you'll get an IP address auto-assigned to you that might be different today than it is tomorrow. Now, because of that, we're not going to want to put a web server on there, because if people are coming to that IP address for that web server, you flip your laptop open tomorrow, it's not there anymore, right? So servers are a little bit different with that, but it's the same set of resolving a name, which might be more like, computer one at department A .ad.wisc.edu or something, right? That's a little bit different than what we end up doing with websites. But other than that, campus has a variety of IP addresses assigned to them in IPv4 space. And out of that, it's actually kind of carved up too, right? There are sections where certain departments have ranges, a bunch of different IP addresses that they can use, whether those are for servers or for printers, desktop machines, laptops, whatever. That make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thanks.
Ooh,
All right.
that's pretty much time.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Phil, for your presentation today. I'll get a little shout out. Phil is also doing another presentation later this afternoon. It's going to be another really good one. But so we'd love for you to attend that as well. But thank you everyone for attending today and enjoy the rest of the conference.